Hello and welcome back to my first attempt at a voiceover video. I'm gonna be making this fantasy type lantern thing, which will light up just a tiny bit as the night falls. Starting off with the crystals, I used the standard technique of pouring some slightly colored epoxy resin into crystal-shaped silicone molds, along with adding some foil flake things I once bought from Wish to add some sparkle when not being lit up. Being a klutz with the camera though, you won't see me remove or cut into the crystals, but what came out looked kinda like this, and I used a rotary tool to cut off some of the edges to make them look more crystal-like. For the tree, I first shaped some mock armature wire into the basic shape of the tree. I then covered it up in aluminum foil, both to save clay but also for the tree to get less heavy. I then covered it all in a rough coat of polymer clay. I also used some natural looking branches which I conveniently found outside, which makes for a cheatingly easy way to quickly add more volume to the tree. And yes, I completely changed the branches when I randomly found some better ones during a different walk. I also cut different strokes and the likes into the clay to mimic the wooden grain, but apparently you won't see that in the video either. Instead, here's some nice painting action. I started by priming the whole model with black spray paint and then went from darker browns to lighter, trying not to get too much paint in the creases to keep some of the darker shades intact. I do, however, have a more detailed tree painting video from when I made the fantasy wine glass using the exact same method for painting. Lastly, I tried some stuff with a candlestick ornament thing that I found at a thrift store. This method didn't end up too great. I'm not a big fan of how the bushiness of the tree turned out, so next time I'm gonna be trying something different. For the mushrooms, I didn't do anything too crazy of a technique. I made some custom colored clay for the caps, since I only have black and white. And then I shaped them over a ball of aluminum foil so they'd be hollow for the lights to fit in. I then smoothed away the fingerprints with some cornstarch and added some detailing along the bottom of the caps. With this method, you can remove the foil after baking and have a hollow object. I then used some stones meant for nail art to cover the caps in whatever the spots on top of those are called. And lastly, I dipped them in epoxy resin to give them a slimy top finish. Remember to wear gloves if you do this, so you don't get the resin all over your hands like a stupid person. On a side note, I made another set of caps before these with slightly different methods, but I had to make new ones because I made the first ones too small, though looking back I think the first ones would fit the look of this lantern better, but I'll remember that for another time. For the stems, I wrapped some clay around wires for soldering later, but I then made new ones which I wrapped around some cut-off pipettes instead, so that I could just push a wire through. I added the midsection you're seeing for some more detailing in this room, since I found them looking a little boring without it. I made a custom mold for the underside of the caps, poured a bunch of cornstarch over it, and pressed in translucent clay, which I then pulled out very slowly and carefully to not break it again. I then cut them up to fit in the cap and with the stems, and then hot glued everything together. And then for the assembly of the lantern. I split open a solar-powered lantern I found in the grocery store, and since I'm not much good with the electrical part of projects yet, I decided to keep the original fairy lights and just rearrange the bottom of the lantern to my benefit, which mainly meant I had to move the battery pack a little. I then put in a bit of styrofoam in the bottom to get the basic shape of the landscape I wanted and covered it with plaster, which dries very quickly, and thereby there's some easy texturing if you just go over it a bit while it's drying. I also covered some foamy stuff in the plaster to make a fake rock for the tree to be on top of. I'm not sure what kind of foam it is. It was part of some packaging for some bowls I bought online. I then scraped some detail into the rock while almost killing my ears with the sound of it and glued it into the landscape. While weighing it down with a random heavy object from my desk, here I used a coffee mug. I then painted everything black and started putting some things in their place. I wanted there to be a tiny lake, so I tried using some broken plaster to make a pile of flat rocks to keep it in and covered it with a little more plaster. Then more painting. First darker colors, then dry brushing some lighter colors to make it look more weathered and leave some of the dark creases dark. I then tried to pour my epoxy lake. Being lazy and sort of stupid, I forgot to foolproof it first, and you can slightly see how the epoxy is just flowing out again. But after cleaning up my mess, I did a first coat of hole proofing by making a thin layer of epoxy around all the corners, and then I also poured in some of those flakes from earlier to make the water look more lively. Next step was gluing down the mushrooms, and then for one of the best parts, adding the greenery. As I might not have said yet, this was my first diorama-like thing, so I did not have the materials lying around. Instead, I tried making some homemade flocking from various random things. I just googled how to do it and tried some of it. What I ended up using most for this lantern was a combination of grated wood, cardboard, and styrofoam, and also just some plain old sand with paint on it. All the flock was glued on with PVA glue, which I've since learned that I could have thinned out with water and maybe saving some glue. I'll try that next time. And then we're done. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please feel free to leave a comment about what I could have done better, being it for the video or for the project itself. And here's the final result.